Welcome everyone to today's Flex webinar. I'm your host, Markus Merritt. Today we will be going over security groups and permission basics. Okay, we're going to be talking about we're talking about users and how we get them the permissions for what they can and cannot do when they log into Flex, and about the easy way to control them within groups so you don't have to do that within individual settings. So first for this, let's go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and we're gonna just go first to look at the users. So we're in the main menu and system settings, and then all the way down at the bottom is the users, okay? So we have within here, we'll just put look at my user here, so I can just double click this to edit it. And look at here what I've got set for the users, but what I'm focused on is down here a little bit in our default security group and then our security group membership, okay? The default security group is designed for an easy way to make sure they have at least one security group, because if they don't have even one security group, then they won't have any permissions to inherit from any group. And that's the easiest way to kind of manage people's permissions. And I will show you later a place where it's easy to turn on and off people's access to groups, but without that default security group, you could accidentally turn off all of their access. And so that is what that is for. So you want to pick that primary group. I do tend to find that it's easiest if it makes sense for people to just be in one group, but sometimes that doesn't make sense. Sometimes you need to have someone who you'd say is maybe both an inventory manager and a sales rep because of their responsibilities, but you don't want them to actually have the same as like management or whatever you're using for these. And so you need to give them multiple groups. If someone is in multiple groups, if you've done that, part of being in multiple groups, if they have permissions in two of them that conflict, it will take whichever permission is the most can do, has access, grants the rights to do things, and it will give that, okay? It will give the most access between all of them whenever any kind of permission is conflicting, okay? So this is just kind of controlling which groups they're going to be inheriting permissions from. And for that, I want to just show that I'm going to just go ahead and cancel and not make any changes on here. And then I can go to this individual and look at each of those individual permissions, okay? And so within this, I do have the ability to override individual permissions on a person to meet certain things, but I generally highly recommend to avoid doing that if at all possible. We see here that on this, every one of these is set as inherit. So I'm inheriting that from my security group of management. And so even though they're all saying inherit, we see that some are granted and some are denied based on that security group that this person is in, okay? And that is best because that person's role in your company may change. And if their role in the company changes, it's easiest to be able to log back in, move them, including their default position, and that will then update their permissions. Because it's also important to know, and we'll talk about a few of these in just a moment, that sometimes permissions aren't just about stopping people from doing things, but about simplifying their responsibilities and moving obstacles from their way of things they don't need to do. It's not about that you care that they can or can't do that, or can or can't see something. It's that they don't need to see that. And so it can help streamline their process if you take that access away so that it doesn't block their view and doesn't slow down their process. And so that's kind of one of those important things, that it's best, in my opinion, to focus on your permission settings through the groups and leave the individuals as inherit completely down the line. Okay, so that is kind of the best practice. Occasionally there's a little excuse of one guy who otherwise makes sense to be in one group, but you need to change one permission setting, and that is okay, but I would try to recommend to avoid that. Okay, so now that we've sort of talked about that from the user end, let's talk a little bit about the actual security groups. So again, for this, we're going to the main menu, system settings, and then in here, we're going to security groups. Okay, in here, again, this is kind of the default security groups that would be in a system. You can always add more groups down here at the bottom. We could just go in here and add a new group. Maybe we wanted to add a like junior shop tech, someone we want to give even less permissions than the regular shop tech. This is when we just hire somebody, they're in their interim period. Maybe we want to do something like that in there. You don't really have to do anything else in this. The description can just help give some other information in this. You know, we could do that interim hire. Whoops, I'm going to spell this wrong. Interim hire shop tech. And we're not getting into the details of security policies today, and so I'm not going to bother with that. So we will just go ahead and add that new one in there. So we see that in there, okay? You also can obviously edit any of the existing ones to rename them, or if you don't like them, you can select to delete them either by clicking the cog and delete, or if for some reason you were going to delete multiple, you can do that and then click the delete down at the bottom, okay? In that, that is the same thing we can talk about within there. Like we said, we can go and edit and change the name. If that doesn't make sense for your organization, feel free to do that. So you don't have to just create new groups and then not use the existing groups. It's easier just to use the existing groups. And so the next thing really quick, since we're first focused on talking users, is I want to talk about that easy way to change users. So you can go to any one of these groups, let's say this inventory manager, and I can view the members. And this will give me a chart of every user in the system. And if there's a lot of users, you will have multiple pages. And then saying, is this their default group and or are they a member of this group? So now currently, nobody has this as their default group or member of group in my simple system here. But if I want to add my user Markus, rather than individually opening him, I can just go here and say, hey, he's now a member of each of those. He's a member and he's a member of that group. I can also change the default on that. But you see, once I've done that, if I save it, I can't turn that off. That again is part of that protection of, because if I can turn it off, suddenly I can potentially remove them from having access to any group, and then they won't have any permissions to inherit and probably won't have any access to the system. So you can move their default group, but you cannot remove their default group, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm not actually going to change that. I'm going to say cancel, but that's kind of a nice tool there to be able to kind of review who is in each group and make edits if you feel the necessity to do that. Okay, so that's kind of the global thing about just sort of controlling those, of having groups to make it easy to organize your employees and your users into kind of buckets, into different responsibility sets, and then do that. So now that we've kind of hit the key of those, we want to talk about some of these permissions. Now, to avoid from this webinar becoming excessively long, I am not going to go through every single permission. I'm just going to highlight some key ones that I think are really nice to make sure you're using to do some of that kind of selective access that I think people will want. Okay, and a lot of this is maybe someone who, again, is a little more junior, like a shop tech. Okay, so we're going to go here to this shop tech and view permissions. We'll see that this is the same list as when I looked at it for the individual user. We just in here have some that we've gone through and moved them to grant from inherit. Okay, now I will say there is technically a way that groups can inherit permissions from other groups. For most organizations, I don't feel that this is a practice that is worth bothering with. And so we're not going to get into that today. Again, generally, if you're saying inherit, they're inheriting from nothing. Therefore, it's always deny. And then you can, grant when you want to override something on that. Okay. So a couple key things that I want to highlight. One is there has been also a nice improvement in the menu of this for Flex 5. Previously, it was a new tab. Now it is a pop-up menu to keep you focused, but one of the nice things is you have the ability to collapse and expand to make this easier access. And you can also see there in the hover that if I control click, I will collapse everything else rather than just collapsing that one if I'm just trying to dig into one. So I'm just going to collapse all of them, and then we're going to look at them one by one. So this here is an important one that I think is important for people to understand. This can view sensitive search tokens, okay? This shop tech is set to inherit or deny on this, and that's generally the common practice on that. And what that means is, and we're actually just going to cancel out to show this, is if I go to my projects and my quotes, in here, I've got my total pricing on here, okay? And this is financial information. And in the default system settings, that is considered a sensitive search token, okay? Each of these, pulling the column of data requires a search token, a search field where we're saying, hey, go get this data about that project and list it in my spreadsheet. Okay, and we've said that, oh, the financial data, that's sensitive. We don't want those junior level people to be able to know financial information. And so by having that permission from their denied, again, back to the permissions, and can view sensitive search token denied, that means if they load up that grid, that same thing, they'll see all the information except that total. Okay, so they won't see that financial data, but they'll be able to know the names of the shows. They'll be able to know the dates on it. And so they could still be a person like, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to figure out, someone said I'm going to be working this upcoming show. I want to go look at the gear and see if I can do some prep to be better prepared. But in nowhere are they going to find out financial data about that thing because they don't have enough context to understand what that financials actually mean. So that's a really nice one there. It also works if you want to load those onto a calendar page on the daybook view. It's the same thing there. Anywhere where it would pull that data. There is the ability for people to adjust which are sensitive search tokens, but again, generally the default settings are fine, and so we're not going to get into that today. Okay, the people who can change it are people who have this can manage sensitive search tokens. Okay, that's just the one thing I want to highlight there. So moving down for some other key things, one other that I do think is kind of important for people to keep in mind is this can remove contact emails from email workflow. That's any time, like when you go to confirm a project and it pops up that email to send out and it defaults some emails in there. Do you want people to have the ability to X those out and not send the emails? Or do you want to say, no, you're going to send the email no matter what because I'm worried you're going to skip that and we're not going to properly inform other people in the company. Okay, it's completely up to you on when you do and do not turn that off. This one in here again is defaulted as saying, hey, if for some reason you're able to run that, we want to make sure you send those emails and so that everybody else is informed about that information. Okay, so that's another one I think is kind of nice and is key to make sure we understand. The one thing here that I want to highlight, because I sort of disagree with this setting where this is right now, can change password. This has nothing to do with changing other people's password. This is about letting the person change their own password. So in my opinion, there's no group that should not be granted the ability to change password. Okay, they can't do anything with anybody else's. It's just if you want to set up a thing of they're like, oh, you know what, I'm worried that somebody saw me type in my password and I want to change my password. Well, that's a good practice. So we should make sure they can do that. Okay. In here, we'll see this is one of those few places where this one is set as inherit. So it is actually grabbing from a different place. We're not going to get into the details on that, but authenticated user is just saying when they go to log in, it will say, yep, you can properly log in. Okay. Very simple there. Next, I want to talk about this financial section a little bit, because this is a nice one to be able to kind of manipulate what people can and can't do, can and can't see. Okay, we see here for this shop tech, they're set at can view financial documents. Okay, grant. So that means if they opened that quote list and then went to open a quote, it would open and they would be able to load things. But we'll see this most important, it says can view sensitive financial views, and that is denied. Okay, what that does there is that it means the working view or the profit margin view that have financial information do not load for that person. So their first view in the default system is going to be the logistics view. So they can see the list of the gear and any planned subrentals, back orders, transfers, those kind of things, but they won't see, again, what is being charged for any of these items. They won't see the financials. Okay, so that again lets them look into the show. Someone says, I'm going to be working on this show. I want to see what gear it is. Maybe I can pull a piece out and learn a little more. But they don't get any access to any financial. You also see this can edit financial documents, and they don't have that ability. So they can't make any edit. They can only view the document. Okay. We also in here can view aggregation reports. That's in the fact that event folders are not financial documents, but they can run reports that pull financial data from children elements, and that will then make it so they can pull financial data if we let them run those reports. So we turn off that ability and they suddenly can't pull financial data. Okay. So that's kind of that key there. I will say I have had a couple times where I've had someone to let someone view financial documents and edit, but not view the sensitive financial views. And it will work if you have some technical person who reviews the logistics view and then throws additional items on of, hey, you missed this accessory that's going to be required, or you missed this other thing. They won't see what it changes on the price, but it will change the price. I wouldn't recommend that commonly, but occasionally I've seen companies where they say, hey, I'm going to start things. I'm going to push it to a technical person. He's going to review and add some additional items. And then it's going to get pushed back to the salesperson, who are there going to double check the pricing information again, maybe make some other updates, and then send it over to the client. So you can let someone edit, and they can edit from that logistics view, but it will change the pricing. They just won't know if they can't view the sensitive financial view about that. Okay. Next thing here that I want to highlight is I want to talk a little bit really quick about can browse and search hidden items. This is one of those ones where I kind of say it's highly about allowing the system to help people work more efficiently, and that removing a permission can actually be about efficiency, not about security. Okay, so what's common, and amusingly for this, I would say this shop tech should be able to browse and search hidden items. What I commonly use browse and search hidden items for, and there's a section in the items when you go to an inventory item and say edit, there is a hide yes or no. Okay, that hide yes or no only references this can browse or search hidden items. Okay, what that does is makes it so people who don't have that can't find those items. People do can. I personally use it for things that you don't want your sales staff to find and regularly put on a quote, so that they can have their searches and their filtering be more efficient. And so accessories, cases, those kind of items, I like to hide them and then make it so any warehouse person can find them, but the salespeople can't find them. Okay, it's important to keep in mind sometimes there might be an accessory that someone would quote individually, so you don't want to hide that, but it helps to make it so when someone goes to search, wireless mic, they're not getting all the parts and pieces. They're not getting the separate handhelds or mics and receivers and power supplies. They're just getting those kits, those packages that you've made, so they can quickly find and put the right package they want on there. So that's a point of, you don't really care if the salesperson has access to those items. It just is inefficient for them to have access. So that's another permission that I kind of like to highlight, is that browse and search hidden items. Okay. In here, we're going to move down. So the last one in here is within this project elements that I just want to slightly highlight is we've of course got first can view project elements. Okay, so every document, every list is a project element. So whether it's a pull sheet, a quote, an invoice, PO, all of those are project elements. The quote, invoice, and PO are financial documents. So that's why we have separate things for first can view any project element, and then go, well, but there's separate permissions on view financial documents. Can you view financials? So it's really quick to be able to separate those two. because you could just say, I don't even want you opening quotes. I don't want you opening them until they've been turned into pull sheets, okay? So that's that first separation. And then we talked about the way you can then separate their access on that financial. But within there, okay, we can let you open a pull sheet. We can let you open a event folder, something within there. We've also got this key permission of can manage project elements. And that's about the ability to process anything within that project element, okay? The key thing with that is to run a workflow action, or for a shop person, this would be about the ability to finalize the pull sheet after prep or the manifest after return, okay? And it's because those run a workflow action that they have to have can manage project elements to be able to do that. Now, again, maybe you say this, more experienced shop tech who's still not the inventory manager can do that, but that junior shop tech we created can't. That they have to, when they're scanning things, have to go to someone more senior and say, hey, I'm done. Please look over this, log in yourself, and then finalize this project if everything's good. Okay, so that's that key thing. It will also give them, some abilities to do things, but it's not about necessarily being able to make edits on it. Note also there are individual permissions within each document that can be controlled under these security groups. But again, for today's basics, we're not going to get into that. Within here, those are kind of the key ones that I wanted to highlight today on this. Those are sort of just some of the tips or trick permissions that I think are key things to focus on, and that are also not clearly obvious in what they do or do not do. A lot of these are fairly obvious. Some of them are not, and I completely understand that. If you want to get some additional information on this, my current recommendation is go to the main menu, help, and to our help center or our online user manual, and then just go ahead and start to search permission, and there is a permissions glossary that gives a lot more detail about this. The video it's referenced is still in Flex 4. We will get that updated in the future, but for the moment, there is kind of a list of a lot more detailed information of what these different things do. I will state that it is not 100% complete. There are issues with it, and related to that, I will state that there is an intention to later in Flex 5 development do a major review of the permission settings and adjust them. There are some permissions in there that, in my opinion, and others at Flex, that they're too broad, that they're on or off way too many things, and some people would go, well, I want to turn on some of these, but not all of these for this person. And so we may do some separation. There's also some place where we feel like two things are maybe doing the same and we may make some combination. So there will be a major review and update of permissions in the future, but that will be later in the process. So with that, I want to just go ahead and thank everybody for showing up today. Always appreciate people being able to be here. We understand those who can't. And so this will get posted onto the YouTube page in the webinar section, generally by Monday at the latest, might be a little sooner than that. And we will see everybody again in 2 weeks. All right, thank you and have a great day.